So I just got back from Joker and I'm trying to wrap my mind around this film. Like, I was expecting it to be crazy, intense, disturbing, unsettling. I was expecting all these things, and I think in that regard it really exceeded my expectations. I had thought the movie looked really good since I saw the first couple trailers, but there had kind of been this little doubt in my mind. Were they just trying to like appeal to the meme crowd to make money off of this film? Were people just kind of reading something into this film that wasn't there? Was this going to be Black Panther for incels? Was this going to be the Gamer Rise Up movie? Was this going to be We Live in Society movie? Or was it just kind of going to be a generic superhero movie and the trailer was just edited in a way to try to make people think it was something that it wasn't? So the question is, did it live up to what everyone was expecting and everyone was hoping it would be? Yeah, I think it did. I think it actually exceeded it. As far as it being like a... Yeah, I think this movie delivers on all the memes. I just have two complaints about it before we get into the actual review. And this is, I guess, kind of a spoiler. He does not say we live in a society, and he doesn't say rise up. There is an uprising, and he does say a society who's abandoned him. So he does say society, but he doesn't say we live in a society. And I was kind of like holding my breath because there's a couple parts in the movie, like near the end, where they're like, what's so funny? And I'm like, just say we live in a society. This is the perfect spot. He's like, you wouldn't get it. I'm just like, ow. Why'd you have to not have we live in a society? So yeah, I think it lives up to all the memes. I thought it was an excellent movie. It's really weird though. Like really weird. It doesn't like even feel like it was made like a studio movie. I don't know. It just has this weird presence to it. I don't know if it's the way it's edited, the way it's shot, the way it's cut. It just doesn't really feel like most movies I've seen, and I guess that's a good thing. One of the things I gotta praise this for was its trailers. Its trailers really didn't tell anything about the movie. Like, okay, so we have that the main guy's a loser. We have something involving stand-up comedy, but it didn't really tell you much about the plot and like what actually goes on in the movie. And I kind of went into this having no idea like what to expect with regards to like the film's plot and the film's progress. And I was very pleasantly surprised. And not having any idea of what was going to go happen made the movie a lot better. Because my complaint I have for a lot of trailers is they give away basically 80% of the movie up until the final twist. This trailer did not really give away anything. Partially just because of how weird and kind of non-linear aspects of this film are. So that being said, I guess maybe let's just start getting into the movie and I'll talk about the plot. It's kind of hard to do these reviews without going through the story. So if you don't want to see spoilers, you might want to just click away now and come back to this later. Okay, so now it's just us. So our main character is Arthur, who eventually becomes the Joker. And he is a mentally ill man, a severely mentally ill man, who's working a dead-end job as a party clown. Well, not just a party clown, but he does like a event clowning. Early on, we learn that he's on 7 different medications. He has a brain damage which causes him to laugh uncontrollably. He actually has a card that says, I have a brain condition. I need to laugh uncontrollably. And he gives it to a woman on a train, a diversity woman, and she just glares at him and she doesn't give the card back, which is going to be important later in the movie because he kind of needed that card to explain his condition to other people. And this is kind of one of the first cases where you can see there is some edgy subtext to this film. So around that time, we see him. He's dancing outside of a store that's going out of business with a sign that says closing everything must go. So a pack of diversity jumps him and steals his sign. So he chases them down and then they break the sign and they beat the crap out of him. So once again, this is very much along the lines of, I think, what people were kind of hoping this movie would be. And the first like 10 minutes, you have the mentally ill, socially awkward, down on his luck white male who's getting beaten down by diversity in a major urban area. So, I mean, it's kind of hard not to read some subtext into this film. So, because of the experience, another clown at his work gives him a 38 special and says, defend yourself next time the kids attack you. So then we go to Arthur's home life where he lives with his mother, who is severely ill, and he basically just has to do everything for her. So he takes care of her. There's this black lady who lives down the hall from him, and she smiles at him in the elevator. And she becomes the target of his kind of incel crush. And he kind of becomes obsessed with her over the course of the movie. And kind of in his own fantasies, as we eventually learn, he believes that she's his GF, because that feel when no GF is a significant part of this movie. Once again, we're kind of seeing some themes here. So we got the down on his luck, mentally ill, socially awkward guy who's in like his 30s or 40s, who lives with his mother in like a shithole apartment, who has fantasies about a girl down the hall from him, and pretends that she's his GF. Anyways, so after this, he goes and does a performance at a hospital, and while he's dancing around, the gun falls out of his belt, and they call his boss, and he gets fired from his job. So now he's jobless, and he goes back to talk to the social worker, and the social worker tells him that due to budget cuts, they're closing the program down, and he's not going to be able to get medication anymore. And given that he was on 7 different medications, and this is the guy who'll become the Joker, he probably needs that medication. Yeah. So he goes back home, and it turns out his mother's been writing letters to Thomas Wayne, Bruce Wayne's father, who's kind of a massive asshole. He's just very elitist. He just kind of looks down on the people of Gotham with scorn, that kind of thing. So yeah, we see basically him go further and further into depression and his own mind. He doesn't have his job anymore. Money's getting increasingly tight. And yet, in typical Hollywood fashion, the apartment he lives in, as shitty as it is much bigger than something I could probably get in Toronto. Which is always something that kind of amuses me about these type of movies. So he finds out that his mother's been writing to Thomas Wayne because she believes that she had an affair with Thomas Wayne years ago, and that Arthur is his child, but that she was forced to sign a bunch of papers, and Arthur, because he's like nuts, it is an embarrassment to his father. So he goes to the Wayne's house. He briefly meets Bruce and makes him laugh. He gets chased away. Sorry if I'm getting events kind of in a bit of a mixed up order. This movie kind of jumps around a lot, so I'm kind of trying to cover each subplot in its up to a logical point. So yeah, so one night he's coming home. I think it might have been the night after he was fired, actually. And he's on a train, and there's 3 kind of chads who are like millionaire stockbrokers who start harassing a woman on the train. And he bursts into uncontrollable laughter because of his brain condition. And they come over and start beating the crap out of him, but he pulls out his gun and he guns all 3 of them down, running away from the scene, still wearing his clown makeup. So this is the first thing, I guess, that kind of makes him powerful. So he goes back to the apartment. He kisses the black girl. It's implied they have sex. This is really becoming a power fantasy for him. He's killed somebody in costume nonetheless. He's got his girl now. Okay, sure, he doesn't have a job anymore, but who cares about that? So people had seen him leaving the scene of the crime. So it becomes kind of like this incel movement where because Gotham's so shitty and there's such a big divide between the rich and the poor, the disenchanted masses adopt the Joker style as kind of a protest symbol. And now he's kind of indirectly famous. So everything seems to be going pretty good in Arthur's life. He finally stuck it back to Chad. He has a GF. People are caring about him. So then he goes to a club, and he finally, his focus of this film has been in part trying to get his comedy career going. He wants to be a stand-up comedian. He likes watching Robert De Niro's show. He wants to be a guest on it. It's a bunch of his fantasies. So he finally gets on a stage at a comedy club. He's a bit nervous at first, but then he hits it out of the park. His GF is there. She loves it. Things are going really good for Arthur. He then gets a call because the comedy show got a tape of him doing his act, and particular they got the part of him at the beginning where he was really nervous, and so they made fun of him on the air, but then they invited him to go on. So like this could be the start of his career. Like I said, he's got a GF. He's gonna go on like the biggest comedy show and get to do part of his act. Things look like they're finally turning around in his life. However, two detectives who think he's probably the guy who shot them come by his house and talk to his mother, who has a heart attack, and she goes into a hospital. And he goes and visits them with visits her with his GF. So then Arthur sneaks into a benefit concert a benefit screening where Thomas Wayne, among a bunch of other rich people, are watching movies, Charlie Chaplin's Modern Times. So he confronts Thomas Wayne, and Thomas Wayne tells him that he's not actually his son. His mother is a delusional schizophrenic who adopted him and just pretended that he was Thomas Wayne's son. And he doesn't believe him, of course, but he goes to Arkham Asylum and he gets the records. He actually has to steal them. So it turns out it is true. He's not actually Thomas Wayne's son. He's a random kid that the mother adopted, and she chained him to a radiator, severely malnourished him. I don't recall exactly if she beat his head in or one of her drug addict boyfriends beat his head in, but the brain injury he has is a result of his mother's physical abuse, and he just doesn't remember that time because of how severe his. So he's kind of has a breakdown at this point in time. Everything was going good, but now he realizes his mother's crazy, that she severely abused him in the past, and that probably most of the issues he has comes from having his head beat in when he was younger. So that happened. Like I said, the social services program has shut down. He's no longer getting medication. But he still has his GF. He doesn't have that feel with no GF, so he goes back to her apartment and just kind of sits there. And she comes in and she's like, "Who the hell are you? Aren't you that random dude who lives down the hall?" And then it turns out, of course, that she never was his GF, and it was just an incel fantasy, and nobody loves him and nobody cares about him. Now that he's completely isolated, with his mother in the hospital, he doesn't have his job anymore. He literally has no more social interaction. He still wants to get back at his mother, though, so he goes to the hospital and smothers her with a pillow. He then prepares to go on the Robert De Niro's show. He puts on makeup, etc. And in the background during this whole thing, the underclass of Gotham have really made the whole Joker murders into a movement. They've all adopted the mask and the outfit, and they're rising up against the oppressors. They're protesting. It's gamers rising up. This is like in the 80s or something. So they're playing their Atari 2600s, and they're like, I don't know, Sega Master System. They're like, rise up, rise up. So that's happening. So he goes on Robert De Niro's show in his full makeup and getup, and he talks about how he just admits that he's the one who killed them, killed the people, and he talks about like how society sucks and how it abandoned him and how people treat him like shit and how everybody's evil and about how isolated he feels. And then we get like his big joke in the movie. He's like, "What do you get when you cross a mentally ill loner who's been abandoned by society with an asshole? Exactly what you deserve." So he shoots Robert De Niro and just calmly walks out. So they arrest him and they're taking him away, and Gotham is just embroiled in a riot. And the rioters save him, and he gets out of the police car, and they cheer him. And then it cuts to the end of the movie where he's in the mental hospital. It's implied that he kills another person who's interviewing him, and he just kind of does a dance, and the film ends. And as far as we know, there's not going to be a sequel. So, what can be said about Joker? It very accurately captures the experience of the modern NEET, the modern incel, the modern hikikomori, or however you want to pronounce it. Arthur is a very good portrayal of the extremely socially awkward, possibly autistic or mentally ill, I guess kind of millennial, or I guess Gen Z now, who's kind of grown up in an environment, maybe with, in this case, without a father figure, with a mother who's kind of a cat lady or a wino or something, who, with a lack of strong male role models, mental illness, and just a general feeling of alienation, has become increasingly unhinged until he reaches the point where he starts to commit mass acts of violence. So it's Joaquin Phoenix does a really good job in this movie. As I said, I think it does live up to pretty much all the memes. It really is kind of an incel story. It is very much is kind of a postmodern story. However, unlike maybe something like my book No Chance, which has a bit of a similar trajectory, it's kind of a no redemption ending. It's kind of like a sorry not sorry type of ending where Arthur's finally happy by kind of embracing his Joker personality. That by kind of embracing the darkness within himself, he's finally become strong. He's finally able to stand on his own 2 feet and face the world. So the movie, I think, does very much, at least in my watching of it, give the impression that it views his transformation as a good thing, that he's become strong, that he's actually standing up and rising up against those who have wronged him. It does feel very much like an Elliot Rogers or just like any of these incel guys' fantasy films. So will this inspire like more socially isolated male violence? It's quite possible. It's very likely. I think. I mean, a lot of these people are kind of freaks who would do it anyways, but I think it did hit very close to home. Obviously, my life isn't nearly in as bad a state, but it does. There is a lot of feels in this, and if you're a millennial or Gen Z male, this film will hit a lot of uncomfortable notes for you. That being said, I think Joker was an excellent movie. I highly recommend going to see it. There probably won't be a sequel, but that just means they won't ruin it by introducing some lame, I don't know, other stuff. So I hope you enjoyed the review. We live in a society, gamers rise up.